Hi, I'm Rebecca, I'm the psych coach, and today I'm going to be talking about overthinking. Overthinking is a cognitive symptom of worry, and it can take up a huge amount of time. People who overthink may well think about situations before they've actually happened, or may well spend a huge amount of time thinking about situations after they've happened. Or indeed, you may be someone who spends a huge amount of time analysing the behaviour of others and trying to work out what certain things mean. However your overthinking manifests, it's typically a huge waste of time and something that really fuels anxiety and worry. So listen up for 5 strategies to learn how to rein in your overthinking. Tip number 1 is to identify when you're likely to do it. Some people might be most likely to overthink on their commute to work, before they go to bed, when they're in the shower, when they're having a bath, when they're zoning out watching a television programme that's not really engaging their brain. Try and work out when you spend your time overthinking. What activity goes hand in hand with your overthinking? If you're an overthinker, chances are you will overthink a lot, but it is highly likely there are certain situations where you are more likely to overthink than others. By knowing when you are likely to overthink, you can have a slightly more preventative approach. It means that if you know you will do it whilst watching on a programme that you're zoning out on, you need to make sure you're not in positions where you're zoning out with television programmes. If you know you do it in the shower or on your commute to work, you've got to give yourself a sufficient distraction to decrease the amount of time spent overthinking, making sure you're doing some journaling, reading a book, listening to an engaging podcast, trying to problem solve something that's coming up in your diary that isn't actually too stressful. Think about how you can be preventative once you know when you're most likely to overthink. Tip number 2 is to look out for dress rehearsals and autopsies. Dress rehearsals are where you overthink a situation before it's happened. Autopsies are where you give a total dissection of an event after it has happened. A dress rehearsal may be where you work out what you're going to say to someone, how you're going to say it, all the areas of conversation that you're going to try and cover, what you're going to do if it all goes silent, what do you think they're going to say to you. Woof! It's exhausting. Don't do dress rehearsals, because ironically, the more dress rehearsals you do in your mind about how social situations are going to go, the more stilted you come across. Trust your natural ability to converse. Even if you don't feel you've got one, and you might feel it's important for you to have a few topics that you want to talk about to hand, at least in your brain, fine, but don't enter into the realms of overthinking and over-preparation. Equally, if you're someone who does an autopsy after a social event or an engagement, don't pick it apart afterwards. Because overthinking and questioning how you came across and if you could have done it differently and maybe you should have said it in a different way or maybe you could have used a different word is just going to take up brain space that would be better spent doing something else. So stop yourself if you're engaging in an autopsy or a dress rehearsal. Put a time limit on it, 5 minutes max, and then leave the situation and do something else. Tip number 3 is to have a go-to distraction. Go-to distractions are things like planning a holiday, are things like doing some online shopping for people's birthday cards who are coming up. It might be planning on what you're going to be doing at the weekend and journaling it and making the bookings for it. It could be doing Sudoku. It could be watching something. But you need to have a go-to distraction, one that is ready available for you to pick up with your phone or mentally that you can use as soon as you start noticing yourself overthinking. Having a go-to distraction means no matter where you are, you have always got an alternative focus for your brain. And that's what your brain needs. You don't need to continually tread along the neurological pathway that you've got in your head of the overthinking. Have your go-to distraction and utilise it. Tip number 4 is to put time limits in place. Overthinking will take as much time as you're prepared to give it. So don't give it very much. Allow yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes during the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, but no more. Put time limits in place, set a stopwatch, set an alarm. If there's something you want to obsess about, go for it, but you've got to do it within a very strict time limits. Overthinking, as I say, will take up as much time as you're prepared to give it. So the key is to squeeze it in as much as possible and reduce the amount of time you're spending doing it. And tip number 5 is use grounding techniques. If you're noticing yourself getting quite worried, getting a bit anxious, and then your overthinking is kicking in, use some grounding techniques. Something like the 5 senses grounding technique, where you just think, stop, I'm not going to engage in my overthinking anymore. Allow me to do something else. And for 2 minutes, you engage in a grounding technique where you think, what can I feel? What am I sitting on? What can I feel? What can I taste in my mouth? What can I hear? What can I see? What can I smell? By engaging your senses just for a couple of minutes, you will get out of the noise in your head and focusing on things that are going to be far more physical. Use that grounding technique as a really good stopping point for the overthinking, and then refocus on something else. Learning to stop overthinking is a challenge. And it needs a lot of practice, but it is certainly something you can get better at and you can master. Put these strategies into place and watch how you start decreasing your overthinking. If you've enjoyed today's tips, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'll give you plenty more strategies on how you can use psychology on a day-to-day